it's great to get started. Josh, would it be appropriate to ask you, could I invite you to start us on Karakia? Is that okay?
Alright, Bruce. Morena whānau, meno tātou. A he honore korore ki whanonga ki te whenua.
Thank you, Josh. That's wonderful. Thank you for a good full turnout. It's great to see everybody here. Actually, I try and say it as a joke, but Happy New Year. This is actually our first meeting of the committee for the year, but I suspect saying Happy New Year isn't actually sort of.
No, when it's Easter. Chinese New Year.
So I absolutely think I'll have to put that one away, but it is actually our first meeting for the year, and it's great that we have such a good turnout. I'm deeply appreciative, including staff. Thank you for the papers and the good work that you've put in. Do I have any apologies that we need to sustain? I want to put the kick of death up and say we have a reasonably good, but I think an agenda we can roll through with appropriate professionalism, but in reasonably short time. So I'm hoping everybody can stay here. So there are no apologies. Are there any matters on the papers that you need to know your interests for? None? Can we look at the minutes then of the 28th of November last year? And I'll move that they're taken as a true and correct record. Do I have a second, please? Thank you, Riette. Are there any matters of accuracy or correctness people need to raise about the minutes? They were pretty much the meeting I could recall. So with that, if I could then just move to the resolution that we receive this before we move on to the action items. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? About saying it's okay. Matters, the action sheet, I think we can dispense with that pretty quickly. We've got a full item on the internal audit coming up, which means I think we can have this matter closed. The governance work plan. Pauline, is that a comment you want to make?
It actually needs to, it's a bit of a draft. There's a significant amount that's perhaps missing from there. And we had at the end of last year with regards to the report, we identified all the things that was on it, and I just need to make sure that's updated. It hasn't got the external reporting associated with it, along the insurance port and the other things with GHL that are coming through. So my apologies. I'll make sure that by the next, you'll have an updated version with it, but basically it will be more in alignment to what you had the report in November.
Thank you for that, Pauline. So I think we'll receive some advice and take a point. Yes, Tony.
Just for clarification, Mr. Chair, so looking at the right-hand column, the meeting dates, is that simply indicating that those matters in each row will be brought back on those particular dates?
Yes, that's the intention.
I'm sorry, Bruce, a bit slow getting my screen up. It was on page 8 of the minutes. Staff retention. And noting that it's back up again. Just wondering if we can get more information around this going forward.
We've got the strategic risk report coming up, Colin, and in fact, my preparation was correct. There's a graph in there that I suspect James will speak to, so we'll leave the question for then, Colin. I'll look forward to it when we get to that point. Okay, so we just take I'm deeply appreciative that we have a sense of where we're going with our meetings. So in fact, the reality of it, it's the addition of matters that you want to put on there rather than subtraction or change. Look, it broadly makes sense as to where things are at. So, yes, Josh.
Just through the chair, about how many extra items are you?
I probably got up to about an extra 10.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a significant amount of the reviews, and it was giving in the details in terms of even our external audits, and then the other assurance audits that were coming up as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
I mean, there are things at the moment, Josh, like the monitoring the production of the 3-year plan and things like that, which ultimately would be good for us. Just to, that's one that would be, I presume, become redundant.
Yes,
Actually, it will still be there, I guess, at 12 June. Okay, well, we'll take that as are there any leaves of absence? I don't know if advise any. Acknowledgements or tributes? Anybody turning old like me next month? I'm not a tribute, but I turn old next month, believe it or not, so there we go. Public input and petitions. None, I don't think we can advise of that. There's no extraordinary business or extra business that I've been advised of, nor notices of motions, nor adjourned business. So we're actually into the substantive, which is tremendous. So a really important item here on the internal audit. Tina, I think who's going to speak to us. What I would like to reflect is, while we call ourselves an audit and risk committee, in some sense, the reality of it is we have two key functions. One is risk, and the other is assurance. So in other words, how do we deal with the uncertainty of our operations? What's going to stop us from achieving our objectives? That's risk, and that's tied up in uncertainty. Assurance is what gives us a sense either the controls we have in place give us the best chance of avoiding or mitigating that uncertainty, and that's where internal audit becomes really important. And in fact, in lots of ways as a committee, apart from the fact that we have open access to Nadine and a team, the formal assurance program is actually our eyes and ears in the organisation. So this is actually quite a foundational paper for us in terms of actually as a committee having that risk lens saying, is the assurance program fitting our needs? And again, I'll be very quick and shut up and let Teddy get on with it. But in reality, and it's good, it's come through recommendation from senior management, but there is this formal part, you see it through the charter, where we have to make our decision, this is an appropriate program. So quite an important paper, which automatically means that I've made the meeting longer. Take 5 minutes to explain it. Okay, can we have the staff report, please? Any cutting comments you'd like to make, Tina? Would be great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just an update, bringing to the table the amended audit charter, and in conjunction with the risk and performance team preparing a 3-year draft internal audit plan of the items that we're planning to address over the next 3 years. So the two attachments, the internal audit charter is basically just an update to bring it up to where we are currently to make allowance for role changes, name changes, and to just slightly increase the scope to incorporate scheduling any reviews of any independent reviews that have taken place. The internal audit plan that has been drafted has been split into 3 areas. The first one being the historical coverage of the reviews that we've done so far from 2018 to last year. There's also an indicative view of this current financial year and next financial year of where we're planning to focus our attention, and then the 3-year plan going forward from there. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Happy to take any questions from the floor.
Thank you, appreciate that too. It's great, good to have it that way. So I'm open to questions or comments. Josh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I agree with the amended internal audit charter and also the draft internal audit plan. You're all awesome. I was just wanting to, and I guess it's across all of our papers actually. It's just consistency in terms of what we shorten down and what we don't shorten down. If I take us to page 21, we shorten the phrase te ranga whakahau, but we don't shorten audit and risk committee. However, in a paper later on, we do shorten audit and risk committee down to ARC. So like it's just that edited part, because from a reo perspective, I find that it's reo Māori words that are often shortened, in that regard. Technically, te ranga whakahau is a shorter phrase with shorter syllables than Audit and Risk Committee, but that's the phrase that gets struck down. So yeah, so it's more about consistency across all of our.
Thank you, Josh. Look, perhaps I can just ask staff to take on board what Josh has said, and perhaps we can reflect that in our future papers. So, thank you for that advice. Yes, thank you.
Following on Josh's point, I thought we formally resolved not to do that.
As a full council, you're right.
I'm pretty sure so that could just be noted, because I'm sure we do resolve that we use full terms for.
Maybe not resolved, but maybe it's spoken about.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Josh. Colin?
Thank you, Chair. Page 17.2. Previously, Council has conducted internal audits on an ad hoc basis, and the demand for an internal audit function has often exceeded available resources. Firstly, I'd like to commend putting that in. It's great to admit that we have had shortcomings, but I do find it concerning that there is perhaps in our past a bit of a hole, and in some of the checks that may not have been done. And in a circumstance like this, going forward, should we be looking harder? Is my question.
Just for answer for Chair, what we usually do if there's a significant amount of body of work, if we had it in play, we do it on a risk-based approach. So therefore, what is the most pressing and what is the amount that's come to the fore with it? Over the last little while, the significant amount of resources that we've actually spread to actually do those internal audit checks has come predominantly in the recovery area. So we would have the finance checks as to say what is the due process that comes through a category 3 properties, making sure that the funding and the category 2 that has. We've then diversified and actually used other resources from probes. What they would normally do is to identify with what we did with NEMA in terms of their immediate response, and then we actually did the same thing with as we're ongoing with regards to the insurance claims, NEMA and our insurers. And in addition to that, what we've also got overlaying that there's a significant major project that we actually need to make sure that we have the assurance and the controls checks that come through with we call the Tech One, making sure that we've got other people. So we have to skill up that. And so wherever the greatest risks are coming through or the greatest materiality, we focus on those. And if there's others things that are coming through with it, what gets dropped or what actually is deferred to a later time with it. So that's basically a sort of how our approach is and how do we do with what we have. And some of it may be a touch lightly in saying if we've had policies which would normally be for a review, we'd have a look to say, are they still relevant as a quick first, and then say we'll schedule it in a little bit later. So that's probably given in relation to the whole program, how do we manage that with what we've got in front of us at the present point in time.
So supplementary sort of question. So you're saying this hasn't got a big history, it's just a recently short period of time that we have not perhaps been covering this?
We do it in different ways, and so normally we would have had probably 2 FTEs that have been working within the internal audit, per se. And while one of those, 1.5 FTEs for a period of time have diverted to the Tech One major projects, making sure that those controls checks comes through and actually have been there. When that resource wasn't available, then we had to divert other people to do the work. So, and it's on, as I say, a risk base. What's coming up? What do we need to have oversight? So you'd probably have the program more in advance in terms of what we were doing, and we'd have it set, which is why we're coming back to the 3-year program of what we're actually trying to deliver. So you have that visibility, and there's more of a schedule as opposed to the ad hoc placement of it. But yeah, good questions.
I think Colin If I could just add to that, I mean, I've taken clearly as a chair a strong interest in what has been, what internal audit have been doing, and I just want to reflect, while I agree with the ad hoc nature and perhaps the low profile that we've had at the committee, I'm comfortable they have been doing valuable work. I suspect actually, as I tend to find in many of my engagements, there's more work for our internal audits than incredibly we can resource. So I would want to stress they've been doing good work, but this gives us, as you've said, Pauline, a chance to get perhaps a stronger spotlight on Josh.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I just realised my other 2 points were in this paper, not the next one. One's linked to the next one, though. And off the back of your answer, Ms. Foreman, is that also the rationale on page 27 around why those last 3 strategic risks have been deferred from 24 to 2025? Or if not, what's the rationale there? And then I have one other question.
So the infrastructure process review, some of the things which we brought forward was probably, again, the risk breaks approach, and one of the things that we're actually looking, and one of it was also with the lens that Tim has brought in through a risk approach with the 3 waters, but we also have brought forward the roading process, how we capture it, how we do it, and making sure that is up to date. So that was a pressing need based on the amount of things that we needed to do. And so it immediately sort of said, yeah, we need to bring that forward.
It's meant that we had to push some other things out to those last.
Yes. But, you know, sort of the things with it, it gives you a little bit of a chance to say, okay, what else are we doing? Some of that also was in alignment where we are with the in terms of the risk strategy profile. And some of the other things where you had with the payroll and things like that, we'd already admittedly did that with an external audit last year in terms with PwC. So we were going to start, so some of it's been done and saying, okay, some of it is not necessary, or we'll incorporate the other changes as we go through.
Prioritisation, right, of the
and what has been done, and exactly.
And then my second question was around page 29. In regards to the treaty commitments risk, it's about the, and this is the one that links to the next, I think it's your report, Ms. Foreman. It has an inherent risk rating in the next report, but it doesn't in here. And understandable, there might be a cross in terms of when these papers were done, but I was wanting to know what year we were possibly looking at having that on our draft plan.
Because it's ongoing and it's getting been assessed there, we will probably be saying as it comes through what are the processes in updating. So that should be updated as we go through this year. And then near, I think, probably preempting some of the finalising that the risk team have done as well.
So, through you, Chair, we are working to implement the risk bow tie and the risk controls within that. And the focus in the first 12 to 18 months is around internal processes and ensuring that internally as an organisation we have consistency across our hubs around how we approach managing this risk. So that's the first step in developing the treaty commitments residual risk assessment process, internally facing, and then we can then go out to our partners and get back to the original risk event definition. So the short answer, 12 to 18 months internally to then go out.
Just to add to that through you, Mr. Chair, with the adoption of the Te Tiriti Compass and the development of the guidance, and I think September last year was when the guidance was officially sort of launched. When we talk about managing risk and a Te Tiriti risk in this sense, what that doesn't only mean is being able to report and capture. I think we need to grow an appreciation for the actual systemic embedding that is going to be required to get us to a point where, one, we can understand a baseline, but we also have consistent systems and processes across the organisation to feed into, I guess, that risk bow tie and that journey in a way where it aligns with the processes that we have across the organisation and our other risk profiles.
So just to further with that, so once you've set up the controls and things like that, the assurance you get is are the controls are effective, are they managed, and your risk, and so therefore that's where that comes to say, yep, they're working. They're saying that yes, we've got the controls, but actually are they working from the internal audit? And usually the priorities when it would be saying if this was a very high risk, you would prioritise it either faster than you would something that is a low risk.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate that. Yes, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two more questions. One is page 21 of independence. And it talks about the development of new key systems and processes, and then that the internal audit should not be part of that process of setting up that new system. So the question is, who therefore is responsible, and is that part of the role of this committee to install these new systems, whatever they are?
Yeah, so there's two probably things and our chair will probably explain it a little bit better than what I would, but effectively if you were doing an audit, you wouldn't audit your own processes that you're doing. And so what the saying that the degree of independence, if you're setting something up, you really can't check that you're setting it up. So in ours, there's a whole Tech 1 group as part of those processes that they're doing it. What they would come back as a step part of that, the internal audit would, or someone else that was perhaps involved in setting it up, would look at it and say, yeah, we agree that the controls that are there are working, or actual fact, there's some lack in those kind of things. So that's the degree of separation in terms of it. So if a one person that was in there setting that up, you would have another person reviewing it within the team.
Within the team. So it doesn't come back to us to get to fully understand that system.
We would explain, we would give you an updates of where it is, what's been completed, if there was any issues outstanding associated with it. So definitely we'll come back in their overall process,
And if I may, through the chair, just to explain the structure. So we have a whole project management structure around the implementation of Tech 1 and its related modules. So we have a project sponsor, we have project managers, program managers, and then in each disparate area we have a subject matter expert or a team of subject matter experts who work alongside our qualified staff that are business analysts, who also work with the vendor and their consultants and business analysts doing a lot of checks and balances. We have other layers as well where we might consider things to be a bit more high risk. So one of the examples is our payroll system that we're bringing. We will have an independent review conducted across that whole system, and we're engaging the likes of PwC to ensure that it's all tickety-boo before we push the live button. The other thing that we do is extra checks and balances is so the enterprise budgeting system, which is how we look after all our finances. And we do this with payroll as well. We run our current system and the new system concurrently for a period of time as extra check and balance. So everything should balance out in our old system and our new system, and then we know how healthy it's looking. So we'll do that with payroll on probably a few cycles. It does mean extra workload, but I think it's necessary to ensure that things don't go wrong, just by way of providing some assurance around the program.
And final question, and I'm just trying to understand the system better, so I apologise ahead of time if I'm going to ask a wrong question. And the question is that we live in a small town, and there is a lot of gossip around all sorts of things to do with council and others. If something is suggested to us as a councillor, can we bring that issue up with the Audit and Risk Committee and ask them to investigate X, Y, or Z?
Probably I should answer that question, although I'm happy to get a Gisborne view. I'll give you Colin. The Audit and Risk Committee certainly can initiate things if it wants to, but I would expect any Audit and Risk Committee normally either react to a resolution of council or potentially a discussion with Nadine about a matter for which it would be helpful for the committee to be involved. I think it's really important, and I mean, so the question becomes, what's the Gisborne solution for receiving concerns that you or your colleagues might want to express and say, can we find out about it? I think it would be wrong for us to automatically say the entry point into those sorts of questions is the use of the audit committee. Can I be honest, Colin politicises the risk committee, and we are apolitical in this room on this particular day for this meeting because it's not actually our role to be political. It needs to go through a filter. Let me give you an example. It's an old example. When I was chair at Auckland Council, we didn't have a direct oversight over the CRL loop, that's the new tunnels for the trains, but was worrying council, and council passed a resolution asking the committee if it would keep its eye on the matter. So that's why I say better for issues to come and routed through council. Council always has the right to pass a resolution saying to any of its committees, but particularly the Audit Risk Committee, can you look at this, can you monitor this, can you whatever, would be the way I'd look to do those things. So the question is, your question is how do they get into the system, but that's something that I'm probably looking down at Nadine or James or Pauline's way as to how councillor queries are actually dealt with, and I think it's a separate system. Okay, thanks Colin. Any other questions?
I'm happy to move.
Sorry, I've got a couple of comments, sorry.
You can still stay there. You can still stay there, Bruce.
I was waiting, but I'll take it that you moved it, which is fine, because there's nothing I'm going to say that I think would change that. Colin, you did focus on the design, installing and operating such systems. That's a really important point that we need to help the internal audit function focus on. What I'm seeing here, Tina, to get this correct, is that not only are you going to do the work, you will have a view about what the nature of the controls that should be implemented are. That's the core part of your recommendation. But it's going to be the responsibility of the project lead or the general manager or whoever is the subject of the audit to actually implement good control, which you want to come back and actually look at. So I was comfortable with that. Can I suggest one thing? And I had a question. Not a quick, well, it is a question. Where are we? Sorry, I need to go back to my actual online thing. Yeah, where we talk about independence. Okay, so it's in that same paragraph. The internal audit partner has direct access to the chief executive. I think we need to include and the chair of the audit and risk committee. The critical part. This is the sort of the unique role of an internal audit lead is that they have a level of qualified independence inside the organisation. Actually, the one other role that I know of inside here is the electoral officer, who has a level of independence over the obviously elections. So I actually think we should amend this to include whoever's sitting on this role as chair of the Audit and Risk Committee. You've got right of access. I think the other thing which I just would want to draw members' attentions to is on page 22, that highlighted area where what we're reflecting is, and it's already seen in the program, we have a combination of both internally and externally sourced internal audit. I mean, primarily Tina's driving it, but we're also we're seeing PW there doing tax compliance work, we're seeing Deloitte's there doing fraud analytics, which I would really endorse. So in fact, the total internal audit function, effort, resource that we're devoting is made up of both internally sourced and externally sourced resources. And if I've read this correctly, Tina, this means that you also, in your follow-up, will review the implementation of any recommendations that come from an external audit. It's an important addition. So Tina becomes our total eyes and ears on the total internal audit effort, which I think is really, really important. My other question or comments would be, in terms of the internal audit plan, At the bottom of page 25, you've got the internal audit scope. I think we just need to include indeed what we've just been discussing, the fact that you will review so the scope of the charter is the same as the scope of the internal plan. It's an amazing bit of detail for me to actually pick up, but don't do it. It's the last one I promise I'll pick up with you. I'm comfortable, and to me the critical thing here, and I said this to my colleagues, is actually the diagram on page, yes, above the table on 28 and 29, because there we're matching the work with the strategic risk. Basically, if we've got limited resource, if we can't match it to a strategic risk, it's probably a question, why would we do it? I can think of reasons why we would, but primarily the dominant nature of the work associated with the strategic risk. So I'm, at this stage, Tina, comfortable that how you've got that set out makes sense from my perspective as chair. That just leads me to my final point and probable question. Just wanted to check on the monitoring, because I mean it's partly Colin's question, it's certainly my question and one or two other colleagues here. Can I just check? My expectation, I guess, quarterly we will understand where you are at in this program. If we're going to approve the program, and particularly those two diagrams, I want to know, again, this is perhaps keeping going back to the acknowledgement of ad hoc, and I don't expect any trouble, I know why, it's for good reason, but where are we at relative to what we intend to do? Recognising that actually other things may overshoot, as you've pointed out, Pauline, number one. Number two, will we get to see a summary of your findings under each of the audits?
We could do those depending on, majority of them they would be. It's the same things with the others.
Well, I'd argue we should see them.
Yeah.
I go back to my eyes and ears. And I think, I don't know quite how you do your reports, whether it's an executive summary and then detailed, maybe just with the executive summary, or if it's just a simple report. I think we should see the simple report. And then obviously from a monitoring perspective, as I think you've indicated here, we'll see the outstanding recommendations which are yet to be implemented but have got passed due by date or whatever on an exception basis. Correct? Brilliant. I'm happy. That gets me going. So with that, Josh, are you still happy to move to approve the charter and the plan? Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that. I'll put the motions in. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. What did you say about this agenda, Riet? It's a moderate agenda.
Moderate.
So I need to pick up speed, I suspect.
I think we're doing well, Bruce.
We're doing well, okay. So look, we're into the strategic risk report. Dan, welcome to the table, buddy.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll take this report as read, and I'll keep my brief on the report brief. So since the last committee meeting, which was, I believe, started December, there have been no material changes to the risks that we've deemed as serious in the residual realm. So that's the financial, asset management, natural environment, and recovery. As we've indicated before, there's quite a bit of linkage between those in this recovery environment. The top of line concern at the moment is that funding shortfall, which I indicated on 7. So damage has been assessed at 1.1 billion, whereas funding has reached 260 million confirmed at this stage. So there's 750 million shortfall approximately. This translates into some uncertainty in the financial environment, especially in the recovery, and uncertainty around what sort of resiliency can be built in. And so I think an appropriate time to review and step back and look at this will be once we adopt the 3-year plan, financial strategy, infrastructure strategy, which is upcoming in the next few months, June, I believe. So
and we'll hear from Kim later. So
yeah, Kim's updating on that. Yeah. So with the recovery strategic risk, Steve and I are working at the moment with that team to look at a layer of risk in their operational program level to try to get some more integrated information management to help inform our risk, get that visibility. Right now, their greatest concern seems to be more around engaging with category 2 and 3 communities that are affected. So that's a higher inherent risk there. So they've added an extra layer of comms around that to keep those communities informed, and I hope that's translated into the 3-year plan consultation process as well, to bring them along. The natural environment risk, I have in the report is tabled for we're reviewing this year, so intending on doing so. Steve and I are right now scoping out how we're going to do that, what that looks like, how long that will take, and balancing that against our capacity at the moment. Our business continuity risk is the only strategic risk that is moving. I probably could have moved it in the last report with the CEDM risk going down, but that's reflecting the controls around resiliency and redundancy in our information technology systems, which are pretty top notch for me. So that's going down to moderate at the moment. That's not to say there's not a lot of work going on in that space. We've been doing a lot of work since Cyclone Gabrielle, doing continuous improvement in that space, and I've scheduled exercises with our senior management in May to test our systems and keep on going. The main updates and the bulk of where we've spent our time since the last committee meeting has actually been for our treaty risk. So we had 2 deep dives on that at the end of last year, where we acknowledged bow tie. So what Steve and I and senior management did at the start of this year, 2024, is sort of deep dive sessions with each director to understand the nuance in each hub and how the risk is applied, because it varies greatly among working area. Some of the themes were identified, and some areas are doing great, some areas could be doing better, and it just depends. But some themes came out of it, and we're comfortable with a initial residual risk at major for that. And that's reflected of those 2 risks, the first 2 risks in the bow tie under 0.35 on page 37. Those 2 were assessed as major and confidently so across the board, and everyone agrees. And so that's regarding capability and systems, and then having the relationship forms. Now, again, it's not uniform. We're doing poorly across this board, but this is where there is greater area of improvement. So we've looked at the control environment there, and that's where we can build a more robust system. So we're working with senior management to finalize our treatment options here, and we'll present that at the next committee meeting. I think we have a good pathway forward to get within a moderate appetite, which is where we are, or where we desire to be, sorry. And I think that will have mostly to do around embedding treaty priorities and activity management plans, so the process around that and how long that's implemented. And I think we have robust support from senior management on that. So I'm not concerned on that point. I think we can sunset the internally facing risk in the nearer term, hopefully, but I'll keep you guys abreast on that. In the meantime, Steve, are there any other points you want to add to the report?
Thanks, Daniel. Through you, Chair, I want to acknowledge the support that Gene and his team have provided us in terms of developing our approach to treaty commitments, strategic risk, and also with reference to our external operating environment. One of the biggest potential emerging risks is the change in government and the approach that this new government is taking around decision making, creating uncertainty for us in terms of our decision making, and they have moved quickly to repeal the Three Waters legislation. That has helped us provide certainty around our own 3-year plan, as we are about to consult with our community on adopting that 3-year plan. Looking beyond that or around that, the government is also changing how it makes decisions around infrastructure and major economic development projects, and the impact on our decision-making process is still to be assessed, subject to how that decision-making is put in place. So alongside central government is the wider economic operating environment. We still have relatively high inflation. It's not clear that inflation is under control, so that does create an ongoing risk to council operations. And alongside efforts to bring inflation back to an acceptable level, there is the impact on slowing of the economy as a result of those effects, primarily high interest rates. So we are in a situation where inflation is still relatively high, but steps to bring it down are slowing economic activity. So that does create an interesting economic environment currently that we need to keep an eye on as part of our risk management. So,
The average cost of funds, Pauline?
Pardon me,
What's
sir?
the average cost of debt? Or weighted average cost of debt?
Would it?
Sorry, I shouldn't have
No,
warned
no,
you if I
no.
asked that question.
Going into the long term, we set it at 4.7%. Yeah, it allowed some of the things with our concessionary low and a little bit lower, but that was only for other aspects, but about 4.7.
Okay, yeah, we're mid-pack, we're with the pack at 4.7.
and just the last point, Chair, is that we are just about to enter into the public consultation on our 3-year plan. Other councils are continuing with their 10-year plan processes. So we are mindful of making sure that we keep across the 10-year space as well as implementation of our 3-year plan.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. That's a very helpful update. And Dan, I appreciate your comments too. Questions on all of those, believe it or not. Can I invite Colin? You did want to raise a question previously about staff turnover, and there's a diagram there on page 36. So why don't you?
So I think it's page 36, wasn't it?
Yes, page 36 is a diagram there, mate.
Yes, so just around staff retention, it's yo-yoing mostly out of our risk tolerance. And we're doing our leaving reports and we're doing our satisfaction reports. I just wonder if the council can share more on these reports. Can we be given updates about the, what are we talking about? About these surveys results. What is the culture satisfaction in the staff? This turnover at 19, nearly 20%, is that normal? Et cetera, et cetera. I feel that it's quite a high risk area and we're not getting much feedback.
Okay. I don't know actually what normal staff turnover is in local government anymore. That's probably something that there needs to be a bit more research on back in the day, and I'm meaning like before COVID times it used to be a figure of about 14 to 15%. I suspect that's changed with obviously the tightening labour market, etc. The other thing I wanted to point out is we report our percentage of turnover on a quarterly basis, and that sort of puts us in that major threshold beyond 17% up to 25%. Our actual year-to-date rolling average, so over the quarters to this point, is about 13.4%. So I don't know if in our risk appetite we talk about the reporting period that we should be reporting for. We've taken it on a quarterly basis. It's still up on average on what it was last year, but that's just another point I wanted to make. We do make attempts in this report, so paragraph 30, for example, talks about why, and this is us looking at some of that exit data and exit stories as well that we bring into this environment and try to do a bit of a catch-all. I'm not. And I think we've spoken about this in the past, and I think there's been the odd email or two explaining, the rationale for why we don't provide those reports verbatim. I think it's really important that people providing those reports understand what they're given for and where they're going to. And I guess one of the risks we've identified for doing it any differently would be that people probably wouldn't participate in them. So it is really rich and informative data for us. I guess what I can say globally is that we still have a tight labour market. There has been an increase in immigration, etc., but not necessarily in the roles that we've got advertised all the time. We are getting some of that labour force as well. And overall, I think things are tracking a lot more healthier than what they've been. in the past. You know, we were up at 27% at one time, and that's tracking down. So yeah, it does yo-yo a bit, and you're going to find that in quarters as well. So happy to provide maybe more graphs to indicate our rolling year-to-date average as opposed to the quarterly average that we've got in the report. The other thing that might be of use in terms of information is where that turnover is occurring as well. You know, like I think the risk is higher if we've got it around the leadership table potentially, or your management layer. Like at the moment, and I think I've used this analogy before, you might have a very low turnover, but if it's your whole leadership team, I would suggest you've got it proper. So numbers ain't everything in this. So perhaps maybe that might be useful, Bruce, to augment some of the understanding at a level I don't know. But yeah, paragraph 30 is taken from both a market analysis, but also taken from the themes coming through in our exit surveys. So we have had a trend of some of our younger demographic off there going overseas. So things like that are occurring. Don't know if Nadine wants to add.
Through the chair, maybe we, another piece of information, so we get updates on our lever data. So for example, in the last month, so our 60% of the levers rated, over 60% rated GDC as excellent. 100% of the levers would recommend GDC as an employer, with 71% considering returning in the future. So we do gather that type of information. We could possibly think about how we bring the trends through, so it's at a level where we're not diving down deep into too much detail, but you can see that you can get a feel for why people are leaving. So here it's mainly work-life balance, relationships, colleagues. Those are the kind of reasons why that they like GDC as well. But yeah, leaving was around going overseas, and so we get that data, but we could maybe think about how we can provide that.
And certainly, if there is something that I think this table really needs to address, we've had this in the past, where at an operational level, we've pulled on all the levers we can pull on, we bring it to this table. So you've seen that verbatim and in fulsome in the past. We can pull through some more of that data. So I'll do some work on that for the next report.
Thank you, Nadine. Nadine described just then, it gives you a whole different view of what's actually happening, rather than we're out of order. Why are we out of order is really what we need to get more feedback on.
Yeah, I guess I'm just, I get it.
Josh, I've got Andy first.
Oh, sorry. No, it was just going to be supplementary to...
I'm on a different topic, so if it's the same...
Okay, Josh, go for it.
And it's more to say, you have reported in regards to this stuff before. It's not this committee that gets reported to, though, right? It's council. So I do just want to remind us that we do get this info, and we do get the cordial around how people leave and things like that. It's just that this is about the risk and where it's at. Thank you for the explanation in regards to the data, because that actually was going to be my question, and I guess it's a question for us as a table. If we know that it's kind of flat and here, is our, like, do we need to shift our view of where we ban and major? And if we did, would that end up having an effect actually on the I guess the urgency to kind of bring that down? Like, have we kind of set that setting correct?
Well, yeah, we've talked about that as well in the risk appetite workshops, about whether our thresholds need to change or not. It's quite a wide band, that 17 to 25 as well. And if the average overall, which is an unknown, and we have tried to seek that information from sort of more national bodies that have a global view. I mean, we get some of the stuff from our peer councils, but you need to have it representative of all councils. So there has been some discussion about whether those thresholds need to be tweaked, but that's what we've currently got and how we report on it.
Thanks, appreciate that. Andy.
Yeah, thanks. The tables are not good reading. The only time I'm really happy to see so much red and orange is the likes of this morning's magnificent sunrise.
Nice.
Yeah. I think we need to state reality. We've on page 33, you may need to consider operating an elevated level of risk in the immediate future. No. We need to operate in an elevated level of risk in the immediate future. Now, I think may and consider are kind of words that are gone. And the basis of that is I was under the understanding, I still had the figure in my head of $750 million problem, and now I see the figure quoted at 1.1 billion and the level of input from government at 260 million. So there's a hell of a lot of risk in those numbers. So I think we need to state the reality, not may and consider. We're at a place now where we are operating at a high level of risk. Yeah, so that's just really what I wanted to say there. The risk of delays to Category 2, do we know what those Category 2 projects are that are risk of, is there a capitalisation listing?
Through the chair, they will be the house lifting, flood mitigations as part of the intervention for Category 2.
Not enough PUTI to do all the work.
I'm not sure what was discussed in terms of what the delays might be attributed to. It might be policy implementation or consents.
Through the chair, I don't have direct line of sight of what those delays are. That's what recovery offices advise, and that's part of the reason why we want to get in and do a project program layer of risk so we can get that visibility back.
Yeah, it is the policy development and implementation and getting on board all the necessary people to actually do the house lifting. That is the issue.
Yeah, other than that, just, let's state reality as it is.
Chair, I tend to agree with Jandy that the environment is incredibly important. And I say the sector environment, not just Gisborne's environment, the sector environment. Are there other questions, folk? I have got some questions I addressed, Dan, so you're not getting out of there scot-free. Tony, you're first.
On the financial strategy risk rating of serious, page 33, after reading that paragraphs 5 to 8, I started reflecting and thought, well, is it serious? I know we've got costs of 1.1 billion and we've got 265 million or whatever. But unless we've committed to projects and then we don't have the money to pay for those commitments, then there's a serious risk. But simply saying, when I read this, I was like, okay, at one point we've got $1.1 billion of damage, but are we saying that we're going to try and meet it all, or we're not? Because if we're not going to try and meet it all, then is the risk still serious? When the definition of risk is failure to be financially sustainable. And I just stopped and looked and paused and thought, well, actually, are we sitting in serious or not? Can that be downgraded if we looked at it in a different way? It doesn't change our financial, our losses, but if we're not seeking to meet those losses, then we're not necessarily financially sustainable, or not financially sustainable.
Yeah.
So that's my sort of query to the boffins.
For the chair, just to give go back to one of the things, how you quantify some of these things as well, is your risk appetite. And under your current risk appetite, it says anything that is over a 500K loss or a financial impact. That's how you categorise where it is from moderate to low or whatever into high. As was reported in previous ones, we know the cost to council, even with the insurance not covering that, is over a $1.5 million. So immediately your risk appetite, which is where you extend that to say we're operating under these kind of conditions, you immediately said that this is a serious risk. So that's how the classification comes from underlying that. You're quite right. If there are other elements that we haven't committed to, that doesn't immediately put you into risk of being financially sustainable because you haven't committed to it at that point, but because we've already got losses that are over that risk appetite, that's the classification for it.
Supplementary, Mr. Chair, that would have been good if that corridor was in there, because when I read the paragraphs, I said what I said. I thought what I said. So thank you for that clarification, Ms. Foreman.
Thanks, Tony. I may complicate it because I want to come back to that point. Yes, any other questions? Yes, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Page 32, again, comment about the red sky at night. Shepherd's delight, I don't think so.
This is the morning.
Oh, in the morning, okay. So we've got to spend a huge amount of money in these three areas really, recovery, natural elements, and looking after our assets. And a huge part of that is the procurement process. And I appreciate that we've just overhauled our procurement things, but just a comment on how important that's going to be going forwards. Now, what's not mentioned in here and often isn't mentioned is the cost of consultants. And I note the incoming government have set a target of cutting consultant fees by 30%. Do we have a procurement type process when we're employing consultants? How do we work managing our consultant bill? That's my question.
I don't know if it's quite tied up with our risk. I would be very interested to know what the answer is actually, Colin. I just want to reflect here. Firstly, your question about procurement. And if we were to go back to the prior paper and Tina's work, there is good significant work happening this year and next year around our procurement, around our contract management, around even our sensitive expenditure. So I think, if I can be honest, I think that's, you're acknowledging that there's been an upgrade in our procurement approach. I'd be very keen that we look at those questions when we get the results back from those reviews, because actually this is testing whether those controls we've implemented are actually effective. And that's going to give us the best objective evidence to answer your question, I think. I don't know whether there's a question and answer at all on the consulting, Nadine, at this stage, but I think the procurement one, this is the benefit that you can see in the internal audit plan. We've got a process in place to deal with. Is there any comments you want to make?
That you're spot on through the chair, and I think part of that is that, so we've got the procurement process that we run for business as usual. What we did find after when we were responding in the response and you're having to move really quite fast, there's probably some work that we need to do in that space around what happens in an emergency, and when you need to procure services that may not necessarily go through your normal processes of procurement. So it's something to pick up through that review.
I'm conscious that it was Josh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just in relation to those serious strategic risks, and acknowledging too that you've already kind of stated that because finance is serious, that automatically makes asset management recovery serious. I did want to ask, are there any other indicators that are contributing to where that sits? Obviously, the big thing is about the huge discrepancy in regards to what we need to do and what we're getting. Are there any other indicators that would be bringing that down?
I didn't think they were the main material ones. That's fundamental to the things. The same as with your asset management. If a significant portion of your infrastructure network is damaged, and the risk is that the assets are not maintained or the assets are not able to function to what they need to be. So that's why that's serious.
I had assumed so, but I needed to ask, right? Yes. Just in case.
Thank you. I'm conscious if I raise questions on between us and morning tea, but I do want to raise a couple. In fact, we're a paper behind, so my moderate approach today is turning into a disaster. But I do want to ask a question, and I'll limit it, actually, I've got a few, but I'll limit it to probably one, and I might look your way, Nadine, if that's okay. Andy, I agree with you. We may need to consider it wrong. We are in a stressed situation. And I think Tony, paragraph 8 raises a really good question. I think that 1.1 billion is real. If it's not a real number that we're managing to, why have we got it? It's in some sense short. But my presumption is it relates to maintaining and delivering a level of service to this community that it needs. if it doesn't relate to a level of service, you know, a reinstated bridge, a passable road, you can flush the toilet, then we might have to consider, is that part of our number? My assumption is that 1.1 billion fits basically that bill. The challenge here is actually in paragraph 8 where we say we'll take a prudent approach. So what does prudent mean in terms of our 3-year plan? And does that over-trump maintaining levels of service? The problem we have got, I suspect, without having seen your numbers, Pauline, is the gap between what is prudent, what we can extract from the community, what our balance sheet looks like, versus actually level of service provision, which is, shall we say, Nadine, a minimum that we want to provide. I don't know what your 3-year, can tell us later on, I don't know what your 3-year plan looks like, but that is actually a sector-wide issue, and I suspect is affecting us here in Gisborne. There's actually, I think, very big risk. I could be wrong. Don't let me use the word risk. I think there probably is still a significant challenge for us in meeting a prudent approach to delivering $1.1 billion worth of fix. So that's why the 260 million in the bank, or perhaps not in the bank, but knowing where it's coming from leaves me very worried about our 3-year plan. Is that fair, Nadine?
Through the chair, that's a really fair observation. And so what we've budgeted for in the 3-year plan is pretty much meeting the most minimum level of service at 11.4%. We're actually trying to address some, not all of the issues. We're looking at 22%. So it is, we are in a serious situation in terms of the financial sustainability of the council and the ability to deliver and meet communities' expectations.
So we're going to have to, by the end of the 3-year plan, have a very strong view what is the prudent position of this council hold. So it strikes me as a big thing. But that gets me then back to my point, Nadine, which I said I've got a question for you, because I agree with Andy. We're in an elevated, an elevated level of risk. We are stressed. The sector is stressed, but I suspect we're stressed. And I was having a chat with Riet before we came to the meeting about actually what should, for instance, our real focus be as governance, but that's for a different discussion. What's the impact of being under this continual level of stress, Nadine? And you can ask that in whichever way you like, but the organisation's stressors, you know, physically that means everybody's got more cortisol running around inside their bodies and you can only go so long at that, yada, yada, yada. What's the story?
Oh, I mean, that's a very big question through the chair, and there are many aspects to it. So I would say that when I came back after a holiday, I wasn't stressed at all. But then as you kind of get back into the mode of things, and then the expectations are great, and the community wants and needs, and the expectation that things will be done immediately then adds more stress to that. So not only do you have the impact of stressed staff, and not all people are stressed, but you also have a community that has also been hurt and are trying to recover themselves and need a response from council, and all roads kind of lead to council at the moment with recovery with everything. So, you know, I guess what we've tried to do is, and this is one of the things we need to look at as a more sustainable model, is that we've had to literally fly people in, fly people out to help us through this period of time. But, you know, we do need to think about the sustainability of that, to make sure that, because these events aren't going to go away, we're likely to have another declared state of emergency at some point, or rather in the next 12 months. We're going to have changes around the Three Waters legislation. What does that mean? It's more work that our policy team that are already tapped out doing business management planning and catchment planning are going to have to deliver. Critical is prioritisation. So we've talked and been really clear as a lead team around what are we prioritising and what do we need to go. And that's critical for governance as well. What do we prioritise and what do we let go? And that's how we can be supported through that. So we've been clear in our plan draft consultation document that we will not be taking on new projects. unless they're aligned to obviously external funding is coming with that. But that does again require, because councils are often targeted to bring in some new projects, and we need that support to make sure that we are prioritising as much as we can to have some kind of ability to succeed.
Look, thank you for that. You could have been eavesdropping on the conversation I was having with Riet. I think it's got a similar
That's
bell.
very good.
Look, Steve, I appreciate what you're talking about, the emerging risk. I think what that is actually going to translate into, and I've said this around most of my engagements, is a governance risk. And that's comes in a number of forms, but I want to come back to the word you've used. Where do we prioritise our effort? What actually really counts from leadership of this community? And actually, how do we have the bandwidth to deal with that? I mean, my personal argument, which I gave to Riet, is what is the three water solution is the most pressing issue we have at the moment because of the way the government has set it up. And that's not a political statement, that's just reality. We have to go in 12 months' time with a solution that is sustainable. But we need to go in 12 months' time with a sustainable solution. Why? Because of our balance sheet. And yet in the middle of all of this, what's our governance, and dare I say management, because you put a management focus on that one naturally, Nadine. What's our governance bandwidth to engage actively in what is the right three water solution? Because okay. Look, I'm conscious of time, and I haven't, all we're doing here, Steve and Dan, is raising risks. We haven't really talked about treatment and control. But I wonder if the conversation we have had is just useful to reflect not only on the good work you guys are doing, but perhaps just thinking through some of those matters which allow us to maintain control, as best control we can have over the future uncertainty that we face, because it is incredibly uncertain. Elsewhere, and probably I am on public record, I don't know what local government will look like in 3 years' time. I think it could be quite different to what it is today. Or it could be moving to something. So, governance, can we focus on the right stuff? What is the right stuff? And do we have the bandwidth? I think is probably, Steve, based on your very correct analysis, and Dan, your very correct analysis, is actually the pressure's going to come around the governance table. Okay, that sounds like a preaching rather than actually raising a question, but I think that was, thank you for that, Nadine, and it was unrehearsed and you didn't Can I go to the resolution, please, that we note? I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Second. Thank you, appreciate that, Andy. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, it's carried. Thank you for that. We are running a wee bit late. Let's have a break and come back at, you need for a cup of tea. It's 10 past 10. We could be back at 20 past. You managed to get that coffee. Internal Audit Charter and the plan, we can only recommend to council that they do. So Heather is in fashion pointed out, as I said, please change the resolution. I'm not proposing to go too much further, but when you see the minutes, it will be a recommendation to council that we approve it. I hope that's okay. I just want to be efficient. David, you're here. Can we have you, please?
Yes. Right. I take the report has been read through the chair. Yep. Okay, so
any key points you want to raise, mate?
Yeah, key points. You'll be aware of significant fines from the White Island investigation, ranging from 180 to 980. I think that's commensurate with the scale of the tragedies and the failings, to be honest with you. So that is just an indication of the fines for significant failures are actually increasing. Focusing on critical risks driving, we had a pretty serious RTA in December, so we're reviewing controls, looking for additional accountability in the driving area. Abuse of staff increases over January. February was the same again, 10 that were reported. So an increase in staff abuse and obviously the well-being implications for the staff that are in those public-facing facilities. And obviously the contractor management ongoing, the overlapping duties is really important. And assurance and verification, I'm going to add a report to the next report in relation to the response work where there's significant risks and hazards, and I think it's good to give you more visibility in that particular area. We did have a serious incident with a contractor mowing, very close to being a fatality 3 or 4 weeks ago. So it's really key that we actually do those assurance and verification stuff. Happy to take any questions in relation to the report.
Thank you for that. Questions, David? Check. The mowing one, that must be a notifiable event with Workstation.
Certainly was, yeah.
Yeah. Where are we at?
Investigations.
I suppose where are we at with them on that?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Certainly aware of it, and we've got investigation, and we're taking it further because we're not happy with certain aspects in yeah.
I would have thought so.
Were we at in the process?
Sorry?
Were we at in the
The
process?
investigation's then been done by the contractor. We've yet to actually review, well, we've reviewed it, but we've got to respond back to it. I'm not happy with certain elements of that investigation, and yeah, it's fair to say. So next week we'll be resolving that and, yeah, making some recommendations. Yeah. I think it does come down to, I have to say, sometimes it is a little bit about behavioural. That's a difficult one to get the right culture and to get people's accountability in relation to the risks that they're faced on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. It always comes back to the, not said always, I mean, you were saying it's behavioural in this case. There is always a level of...
The primary duty of care goes on.
Actually, I think what it is that, in fact, I have a friend that's lost a leg years ago, and he said, I always thought I was the safest person around, and it's the attitude that we have, yet he wasn't cognizant of the risk. This was before health and safety, cognizant of the risk that he was actually taking. Okay, look, that's really interesting. So I would be very interested in your I think you said you're reporting around response, and that's good. You also said focus on driving has re-raised itself as your critical risk, not trying to ignore the others. And so you might want to also give us a sense, David, of what more is going to happen around that particular risk, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, I think I've been given more accountability. Well, we've been actually recognising good behaviour on the driving, which is always good to recognise good behaviour.
Yeah.
We haven't been so good on the bottom of the driving performance, which I think we're now looking at addressing.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
The health and safety team send out a leaderboard periodically. I'm not making light of it, but to acknowledge good behaviour.
Yeah. Well, I think David's point, James, is that sometimes you've got to say particular behaviour. We can only say enough's enough. You've got to actually do something different. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for David at this stage, guys? It's a pretty fulsome report. We've probably focused a fair bit in the past, but I'd like to suggest that if there's no other questions that we do go to the resolution, which is that we thank you, Josh. Seconder. Thank you, Riad. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, it's carried.
Thank you.
By the way, we do have an external guest, good friend Stuart Much, the auditor, who was actually trying to be with us today, but the boy has got COVID. Typical auditor, going around diseases, hawking around the country. So you can tell Stuart I said that, by the way, too. I'm to defend my statement. No, well, Stuart's crock, but his availability is just a wee bit dependent on another commitment he's got to lead with Parliament. So we may get a call from Stuart. I need to talk to you now, or you won't have me. So when Stuart will break to make certain we deal with Stuart at his item, it also means we might defer that open item towards the end of the executive. Anyway, the next thing is the Kim. I met you yesterday, Kim, and we're in your hands. Key points from your 3-year plan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just firstly, thank you for giving us the opportunity to give an update on the 3-year plan this meeting. We're well into the development of the 3-year plan, as I'm sure you're aware. following the adoption of the strategic framework by Council in December. That's led forward, and you'll see that reflected in everything that we're carrying forward. We're into phase 5 now, which is our consultation and adoption, and which is pretty timely because tomorrow we will be presenting the adoption of the consultation documents and the calendar to Council. Alongside that, there will be another policy, the development contributions policy, that will be adopted. So alongside the consultation document for the 3-year plan, we also will be having concurrent consultation with the 3 policies, that's fees and charges, development contribution and rates remission. And also supporting all that, as Dan alluded to, will be the financial strategy and the infrastructure strategy as well, which will be key to everything that we're doing. And the council will be familiar with those papers. I guess the key thing for us is, the key risk for us at the moment, and we've alluded to it already, is if there are any changes, further changes in legislation from the government. We are aware, obviously, that the 3 water service reform has been repealed, and also opportunities to look at any changes that come through within the time frame for our delivery. So the adoption of the consultation document is tomorrow, as I said, but the actual adoption of the 3-year plan is in June. So not far away. So we're working to quite a tight timeline, and it's a whole of organisation project, with quite a few moving parts. So we're keeping on top of that. Things are running simultaneously alongside each other to make sure we meet those dates. So this is really an opportunity to bring you up to speed, because we've worked with the council up to this stage on the strategic side, but just around the operational side as we deliver the plans. So I guess the main risk will be the timeline, but we have that covered. We're working on all aspects around that. So just open to any questions around that, if everyone's comfortable.
Thank you. Kim, not just looking at your timelines, as you say, one of the big steps tomorrow comes tomorrow with the adoption of the consultation document. So our focus is not on the policy that's in behind it, although actually, I don't know whether you were here, we've had already quite a discussion about the 3-year plan and financial prudence, which is a significant governance challenge. But having said that, let's look at the risks of this as part of our role. Have we got the project in a position where we want it to be? I guess if we are adopting the consultation document tomorrow, we have to say probably it is online, which is well done, bearing in mind that we've only got 3 months to get it through and nailed by the end of June. Question? Kim, I have one. Sorry, I've got one question, which I want to put in a. I'll look at it. I'll work it out. It's the sense of comfort that while we've got this dispensation to plan for 3 years, it's not impairing probably where we need to be in 10 years' time. 10 years' time is not a long time in terms of our investment decisions, in terms of this council. By the way, I argue for the rest of your colleagues. Some councils, I think 10, have adopted the enhanced annual plan, so they need an annual plan this year. It's exactly the same argument. Wrong word. It's the same question I'm posing them. If we have a focus on 3 years, I think we still need to have a sense that actually we are protecting our position of where we want to be in 10 years' time. So I want to have my cake and eat it too. I want a 10-year plan, Kim, as well as a 3-year plan. And in fairness to you guys, well, actually I suspect you have it to some extent, that view. And I just wondered whether you could proffer a view to me how we're protecting our future position through the current plan.
I can probably answer that one if you like.
Okay, good. I got one. It's like Tom Silver else is doing the work for you.
You need some comfort.
Some confidence as well. Well done. Yeah, Pauline and then Adit.
I'll go.
Yeah, no, that's
if
fine.
I may, through the chair. So part of the vision setting approach that the council went through for the 3-year plan identified that that was the balance that they wanted to strike. So very clear over the next 3 years, you're going to do some specific priorities that relate to healing our environment and our place, but also as part of the vision, it's for our future as well. So we're really clear that there needed to be a balanced approach and that we've still got one eye to the future. Underpinning that as well, we've still got our 30-year infrastructure strategy, that there was a light touch review on that, and some changes made to reflect the recovery situation that we're currently in. And we also have our financial strategy as well, that is also as part of it. So certainly hasn't compromised any of our future thinking. We have spoken about or touched on the changes that may happen as a result of Three Waters and left ourselves the ability to move in that space as well. Pauline.
So just adding to that, while there is a 3 years, there were two things, there's two mindsets. Where do we want to be in 27? So we have a straight platform where we want to be within that 10 years. The financial strategy definitely forecast out more of our debt and what would that mean, what does it maintain over the 10-year period, because we had to have a longer term view. We can't only take an isolation of this, because we may put ourselves in a position that we're not ready to respond in year 4. So it does take a longer term view and taking those kind of aspects with it. Yeah, it wasn't just in isolation, it was taking those. Most of it was taking the story along. Where will we be landing in 2027, ready for the springboard to where we need to be for the next stage of this process as well. But yeah.
It's good to know. There's company here. Yes, Red.
I do want to challenge what you just said.
Oh, yeah.
And for us as a council, we have had this discussion that because we cannot do everything that we're supposed to do for a 10-year plan and have a proper, audited infrastructure plan and that long view, even though none of us are losing sight of that, and we know very well that Three Waters and how we position ourselves and the work we do in the next year in order to make sure it's sustainable is a massive focus. I do want to bring back to the discussion we had as council that we just cannot be everything for everyone in the next while. We will have to cut our cloth for the next 3 years. So I agree with what you say. Let's not lose sight of where we want to be a springboard in 2027, where we then have our 10-year plan. But I also want to make it clear that as governors, we are well aware that it is going to be 3 years of doing the bare basics and only doing recovery stuff, and extra stuff will have to get the no, and it will not be popular with the public. We will not be able to do everything. So I do hear what you're saying, Bruce, but I also want to challenge us as an organisation. We have made it very clear that the next 3 years is a recovery focus. It isn't aspirational at this stage, it is just getting some of the basics done. I agree with you, we shouldn't lose sight, and we should be focusing on those bigger picture things. But we also need to make it clear we cannot do everything that we used to or are expected of us in a normal 10-year plan cycle.
So it's a really valid point, and I take the point. And I think we are agreeing actually in the long run. And it goes back probably to Tony's point about the 1.1 billion, for instance, which is perhaps a recovery number. The recovery event automatically affects our overall financial position. And yet overall, we are having to devote resources to recovery, which if we didn't have that recovery, would go to probably a normal 10 years. So we are automatically impacted. It's a question of how do we integrate that we're still trying to aim with. There are 10-year aims and we probably have to change. That's probably your point. We have to take this, not hiatus, because there's a lot of work going on. We have to take this 3 years around. It's affecting the 10-year bit. Okay, that's really helpful. And then I've got Rob.
Thank you. Sort of following on from Adit, we've got 430 mil capital, of which 84 is reliant on external funding. The chances of us falling short are quite high at this stage. and yet we are committed to the likes of 6.5 million on the swimming pool upgrade. And to me, that is a discretionary spend that we should maybe just be holding back at this stage. I know we get told that we have to spend it, but surely in a situation as ours, eyes rolled, have we no option on some of this discretionary spend?
So the answer that was given when this question was asked is that we had to put that forward in order to secure the $40 million for the pool. So often when we do big capital projects, in order to attract external funding, you then have to show that you have some skin in the game. For us to now go back on an agreement with the government is not an option. I hear what you're saying, and staff will be addressing it in the appropriate way, but it is not just as simple as then stepping back, because we will be breaking an agreement which were made in good faith that there's also buy-in from this community to put some of our own putia into that. So I hear what you're saying, but there are certain aspects that are just not as simple as walking.
So in a situation like this, can't we ask for unions, and can't we commit to spending in 4 years' time, but giving us the breathing space that we need in this next 3 years?
I'd like to just put a line under this conversation, because we're broaching into policy. And again, I'm coming back to the fact that's a political decision. I'm not going to sit over a conversation that is relevant, but it's not relevant to this committee, Colin. So it's a very interesting point. In fact, you've already been on the phone this morning, Colin, about the situation, not here, but elsewhere, in a very similar situation where you're on the point of adopting the CD. A critical question, and probably where your stuff comes in thinking, is what happens through the submission process. What do you make to adopt the final, say, LPP 3-year plan, which is where some of those political questions have to be probably answered. Rob?
Yeah, mine's probably not so much around a financial risk. Mine's around reputational risk, really. And I've read the consultation document, that we're looking at, a 3-year plan document. And we spent a lot of time in workshops leading up to this, and we came up with 3 priorities for the recovery.
Yep.
And in that consultation document, I just don't see them really clearly there. And I think we just need to be really honest with this community that if you tell people what you are going to do, we're not chucking everything on the scrap heap, we're not chucking projects out altogether, but we're going to be delaying them. And I think we need to be very clearer. And the 3 priorities were I thought were fairly clear, and they were around drainage, roading, and around compliance, making it easy for people to get on and do stuff. And I don't see that directly there in that document. And I think we just need to be, hard decisions are never pretty. They're not, they don't make everybody happy, but this is reality. And if we don't be very clear with this community, people are going to say, but we want this and we want that. Well, we're not saying we're going to chuck it out. It's not being chucked on the scrap heap, but it's being delayed, because these are our priorities. And I think we just need to make sure we're very clear that this is what we're going to be doing, because I think if we do that, people get on board. They get behind you. So that's where I've sort of picked up on.
You've got a debate on that tomorrow. The CD is clearly the centrepiece, so I'm trying to address your question. It's clearly the centrepiece. But what else are we doing in terms of our comms and engagement strategy around the release of the CD and dealing with the inevitable questions that flesh out what a good consultation is?
I can answer on behalf of the project, and then I might pass over to Anita, because she'll be addressing that tomorrow. But the project are putting together some information sheets to help councillors approach the community, as you suggested. So summary sheets for the key points, and I believe there's been some fact sheets, but there'll be information on the website. So all the information will be on the website, and we are predominantly looking at online submissions. But in terms of the actual consultation itself, the actual calendar, that is sitting with Council to be adopted tomorrow, that approach. Consultation is from the 20th to 20th of March to the 19th of April. And that will involve, as we said, consultation on the actual document itself, which refers to strategic framework, so our vision, and it does try and stick to those. It does stick to the 3 strategic priorities that we came through very clearly in terms of the priorities of the work. So that was the leading force behind the design behind that. We will also be consulting on those 3 policies that I talked to you about concurrently, so fees and charges for 24 to 25, rates of admission, and the development contributions policy. So that information will be online. Those policies, those draft policies will be online. The draft supporting documentation will be online, so if people really want to read the full financial strategy, that's there. We will be giving our councillors just the summary sheet 2-pager of what those are. That's the plan, and to help around the rates side, there will be, just talking about the differential rating areas. Just, I know you're familiar with it, but you'll have a piece of paper that is there and you can point people to it. So we were listening to your meetings and taking notes. Thank you, guys. So that will be there. But that information will be useful for the public as well. It's not just for councillors, and also for our own staff here. So that's what we want to share. Staff will be informed through a 10 at 10 around what the plans are. So we're all up to speed. And certainly Nadine, through her CE vlogs internally, staff have been informed of the 3-year plan to date. So there is a lot of things going on behind the scenes to make those communications clear. But I'm going to pass it over to Anita. Lots of long hours.
Through the chair, before Kim was in planning and performance, you actually wrote the communications plan for the 3 year, and so has an intimate knowledge in terms of how we're going to roll out and engage with the community. So what she has just said is basically I'll total with that in terms of the actions that follow on from the adoption of the CD.
Yes, what I'm trying to reflect here, and thank you for what you folk have contributed, Rob, is actually ultimately, it comes, when we talk about governance, the role then of us, you, in how you create then the conversation with the community. The consultation document, it's just the foundation and platform for that. So, I think any other questions for that's really helpful, Kim. Thank you for that. I've looked through the risks and your ratings are high, so I mean, thank you for reporting those. I think what I'm reflecting here is it's just uncertainty about the future, and it does make it look a bit tricky. But I suspect when you look at the mitigations, you've done what you can reasonably do, and if it happens, it happens. I know that sounds a bit reactionary and defeatist, but I think equally positively put, you've got the mitigations in place that could be reasonably expected. So that's really, really helpful.
I'm happy to move.
Are you happy to move that? Thank you, Riet. Do I have a second, please? Yes, thank you, Andy. So the motion is that we note the report. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, is carried. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate it.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, we've got Stuart on.
So should we is it okay if we take Stuart now while we've got the man, or is he?
I think he's online, and he looks like we're going to have a picture soon.
Stuart, I was about to say, how are you? It's a very standard approach to greeting somebody, but I know how you are. Are you on the improve?
Oh, I think so. Thank you, Chair, for thinking about my well-being. No, look...
you said you were just hawking your diseases around the world, Stu. That's what I said, something like that, but not at all. No, I hope things get
look, I took a bit of a bad turn on Sunday night. Monday was a bit average, and then Monday night was pretty average, but I'm feeling a bit better now. But I shouldn't, and I didn't come to Gisborne to share my health with you.
We're very grateful, Stuart. Look, and always tremendous to have you join us. So, look, we thought it would be useful just to change our agenda, seeing we have got you, and we will deal with the 23-24 audit plan now. So,
look, I'm happy to talk to that.
Hold on, Stewie.
Sorry.
I wanted to see whether there was any staff You want to talk to that, Jen?
No, I basically let it as read, and as you say, Stuart is here. The only thing is, if there is an adoption of it, let's say reckonings to council to accept the plan, that would be the only.
Okay, you want to change it? Yep, that's fine. Thanks, Stu. We've done. We've approached it now in good form. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So we've been meeting with council, with management, and putting our thoughts together in regards to the approach for this year. We also met with GHL to plan our audit for your subsidiary. We've put together the plan, so it's reasonably consistent with last year. However, it's very much focused on the key risks arising as a result of the response and the work back from the cyclone. So in 2023, we actually switched our materiality settings to revenue because we thought that basically a lot of the spending would go on sort of capital works to sort of repair things, but you were getting sort of significant funding in from external sources. This year, we've flipped back to expenditure. So because of your overall operational tempo, lift of your operational tempo to respond to the cyclone and to fix things, to keep those, or to try and reopen roads. We've obviously very aware of the level of expenditure that's being incurred across council. So we've got a number of key areas of focus, and I won't go through all of them. The major areas, though, really are around the cyclone recovery and the funding, and the impact on infrastructure assets, and how we deal with that, and how council is dealing with that. You're obviously very much aware of the different funding streams you're receiving from central government, and how they're being applied. We've documented a few of those within our paper. I must point out that I've possibly got the numbers associated with woody debris a bit wrong, so don't hold me to account for that. But certainly the funding stream and how it's been spent in regards to woody debris will certainly be a key area of focus for us. But essentially, it's what's important to us is understanding your new processes for receiving those funds, or at least applying for the drawdown of those funds, and then how it's being spent on the appropriate areas, so that you are holding yourself to account in terms of the application of those funds, and then understanding where you're setting up new processes, such as the buyouts of Category 3 properties, the steps you're taking to do that, and then ultimately how you are drawing down the portion of the funding that you're receiving from the Crown, and then how you're accounting for the properties after you've purchased them, because obviously you're buying them at an agreed value, but their enduring value will be significantly lower than that. So it's about how you respond, how you account for all that. So essentially, there's additional funding. I know that a lot of it's going to be take a lot of time to draw down, because you will not do all the work in the year to 30th of June 2024. That's just impractical. It's really important for us to understand how you're setting up those processes to draw down those funds. In terms of infrastructure, the key thing for us is you will now know a lot more in regards to the state of your infrastructure than as compared to what you did at 30th of June 2023. So you've spent a lot more time out there working in your infrastructure, understanding where it's at. And does that mean actually you've identified further impairments, or have you identified things that actually don't need to be repaired as much as they do, or have you made decisions around elements of your infrastructure that are basically write-offs, or you will not seek to repair? So all those sort of status of your infrastructure questions flow into the valuation, that flows into whether you are capitalising costs or expensing costs. and it flows into potentially derecognition of asset questions. So there's a fair bit of work to be done in regards to understanding how the council is managing that process, and for us, making sure that that's in line with our expectations, and that the valuations at 30th June 2024 accurately record the appropriate picture for council's infrastructure base. A number of the other areas are more consistent with sort of more normalised years, but obviously things like performance reporting are impacted by your service provision to your district is obviously impacted by the ongoing impact of the cyclone, and so therefore that will present challenges in terms of your achievement of performance measures, but I don't expect it to impact on your ability to actually measure those. The other key areas is around expenditure procurement, and ensuring that we obtain comfort across probably a sample of sort of some key procurement decisions about how you've applied your policies to carry out good procurement practice. Lastly, we will be doing the audit of Kismet Holdings Limited. They've obviously got significant asset holdings themselves, which have seen quite major valuation changes over the course of the last couple of years. Hopefully this year things have settled down a little bit more, but we understand that obviously they're facing challenging economic times. So we will undertake that audit and then feed any findings from that into your sort of group consolidated result and our group reporting to yourselves as a committee. Probably easiest to leave it there. Key questions for the committee is whether there's anything that's really sticking in your mind. I've had to disappear for the last 45 minutes to attend another meeting, but if there's been anything that's been covered that you think we need to focus on as part of our external audit, or if there's any questions about what we've written down, I'm more than happy to have a go at answering them.
Hey Stu, I just had one question which I know people would probably ask. It's about the threshold that has nearly doubled. Are we doing this work, just more of it?
The reporting threshold last year was actually 4.2, not the 2.4 in management's paper. So we might have had a typo in management's paper, but if you look to our close report last year, our materiality setting was 4.2. The general basis is relatively the same, but your organisational tempo and the level of expenditure is much higher. So, I mean, the 4.2 that we had last year was reflective of, effectively you had very intense operations for your last 6 months of the year. This, because we've got up to 5.4 now, basically because you've had pretty intense operations for the full 12 months. That said, we audit to a lower level of that. That's ultimately the level at which we'd sort of say your financial statements would need to have a qualified opinion. So we report back to this committee audit differences greater than $280,000, which I think is an appropriate level to be able to report to you in terms of if things are going wrong.
Thank you for that. And yes, it does make a difference if it was 4.2. I did check back with the previous one versus 2.4. Thanks for that clarification, Stu.
I think also it's. I mean, I like your concept of tempo, Stu. Because actually, in terms of what Stu's talking about and focusing on, the big valuation issues for which there's high in judgment, it's good that we have a reasonable level of I'm going to say latitude, that's the wrong way to put it, but materiality behind us, so I can understand that, and Stu will want that as well. Josh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Stu. Just furthermore to the to lifting that cap of error from 120 to 280. I hear when you say that you consider that to be reasonable. Can you expand on why you consider that to be reasonable?
So look, the normal range for councils, local authorities in terms of the setting of materiality is between sort of 2 to 3% of expenditure. That's what we've historically driven, and I know that's applied across the sector. We've, we think it's reasonable because essentially, you now have some very large numbers going through your financial statements. Yes, I know that there's a higher degree of risk associated with spending that amount of money, but your infrastructure base involves very, very large numbers. Ultimately, we set lower testing thresholds. We have a pretty low audit difference tolerance level, so where we report the audit differences to you, and historically we've experienced a low level of audit differences in our audits of Gisborne. We find that you accurately prepare and report your results. We also find that whenever there is a matter of judgmental sort of back and forth, that management and I are able to come to an agreement. So we don't set our we set our materiality basis on the basis that we know that management pretty much get it right most of the time. And that if we do find an error, it's usually more an anomaly rather than a poor judgmental decision, and so we therefore take some comfort from that control environment.
Awesome, Stu. Thank you very much. That gives me a lot of assurance in regards to that. Thank you.
Any other questions, Stu? One question Stu did ask us, and is left hanging here, is he's indicated the areas that he's looking at. Does that align with what you would hope he would look at? Perhaps I would put it this way: do those align with the areas that you need comfort over? We're talking here about external party and independent, and former Stuart and his team. Are you comfortable those are the areas we should be focusing on?
I'm very comfortable because last night when I went through the different categories and everything that will be done in each category, I was satisfied that we are covering areas that are specifically at this stage like our recovery, which is a big issue for all of us, but then also the basics, which is a great area which we need to focus on, our infrastructure assets. So because the stuff like right strike, and that's normal, the grants and the subsidies or sensitive expenditure, but I was really happy to see especially those two areas fleshed out quite a bit. So yes, I am satisfied that we are focusing. I couldn't think of any gaps.
Thank you, Red. I would agree. Stu, look, just a couple of very quick questions from me, which are more around the logistics. We've got a slight change in your team at manager level, correct? Have I read that correctly?
Yes, so Kayleen was my manager last year. Essentially, we looked at her book of business and realised it was too heavy. And so she will not be the lead sort of senior manager on the engagement this year. She's still in as part of our audit team. So I brought Mark in, who is a slightly more junior manager, but he's worked on Gisborne before as part of the actual core audit team. He's a pretty competent operator, and he'll have Kayleen available to bounce questions off, but obviously it'll probably mean that I'll need to be a little bit more hands-on to sort of support him through his first year of audit as a manager on Gisborne District Council.
Yeah, look, and I'm going to state the obvious, Stu, but I presume you will be heavily involved in these key areas of focus in terms of, not necessarily the field work, but this will have a strong set of eyeballs from you over these matters because they are critical matters, as I think Riette's outlined. You know that you really are the person behind the review here.
Yeah, absolutely. And throughout the audit, I'll be comparing and contrasting my experiences across Central Hawke's Bay, Hastings District and Gisborne, because you're all dealing with similar issues, and so therefore an ability to do some comparability is one of the benefits I've got to working on the audits of those three councils. But yes, I'm very definitely going to be looking at those key areas myself. The rest of the team's actually relatively stable. There's a number of people who will be returning that will be seen again.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stu. Look, and just the final one, which is page 94 of our agenda, which is the engagement execution, or the timeline, basically. Pauline, there's nothing from our perspective that doesn't meet our expectations. We might be struggling to be prepared for this.
No, Stuart would be pleased that we've got the adoption of the, what was it, a 1 week later than it was, where we always were trying to get it at the end of September. We've now got an extra, it's 2 weeks, so yes.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, look, the critical thing here, Pauline, is that we, EY need information. We'll have that information ready for them on these dates, correct?
Yes.
Good to know. Well, look, I'm very happy with that, Stu, and thank you for your comments. I don't sense there are more comments from the staff, so from my colleagues here, I wonder if we can move to the resolution, which is
The adopted change to recommends to council to adopt the report plan.
It says here, Mike, says that we note the contents of the report.
Probably.
So we should be saying we recommend to council adoption of
Yes. Yes, please, sorry.
Look, I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Josh. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you. Stu, you're welcome to remain, obviously, but I could also understand if you need to dip out and continue your recovery. So thank you for being here, mate, and we certainly look forward to the ongoing engagement with EY through that audit process. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'll stick around, but I'll go off camera.
Okay, rightio. Insurance strategy update, please.
Morena, Andrew, and through the chair, I have the insurance strategy update to present. I will, before I start the report, just make a note that from the past meeting, we can now confirm that insurance is in place for low-value vehicles. Notably, what was brought up was our scooters, and we now have 21 of those low-value vehicles insured that council staff use. Through the chair, this report is about council has a strategy that was adopted back in late 21, and with that we have basically key points or strategies that we follow. And on page 71, I've got the strategy that we're following, where there's 5 points that we have in the strategy. And I'm basically showing you where I expect that these will be updated. And also on page 73, we have more explanation over where we are with each of the strategies, because basically this was done by our insurer, where they gave a risk profile over the activities we are to do. So they named 2 were critical. I see one, third one. Yeah, 2 were critical and 3 were major. So we have targeted the first 2 strategies, and already we have completed one that is an ongoing process, and the second one will be again, we're relying on our partner, which is the Botless Council Group, and I expect that to be completed by June this year. So I'll take the report as read and ask I'm happy to answer any questions on this report.
Josh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the report, Mr. Hoy. Always great to see you at the table. I wanted to ask, it's kind of in relation to page 72, and also it's a detail on page 72, but also linked to the table from page 73 onwards. It's point 5, bullet point 1, just in regards to the whole, which is a really fair point around how when we're in a emergency situation, you're so wrapped up as an organisation, or just as a community doing the work, we kind of, how do we balance slowing down in order to ensure effective documentation of the insurable things? Does that, because you've identified like what's a clear kind of procedural risk there, does that fall into underneath any of those risks inside that table? If not, maybe, should we be considering adding it in there in terms of building that process? I would assume it's a process thing that could fit in under something else, but yeah, that's kind of my general, yeah.
So, for the chair, I'll just actually responding. This is actually how do we make the claim? So Gabrielle, as we know, where it occurred, it had significant impacts and our water supply. And so in terms of the water mains were broken. And so the establishment or rectifying and the cost of putting them to right has been completed, most of the tomos and things like that. So this is the process in saying, how do we go through it, and how's the details that we need to provide the information to both NEMA and to Aon, and both of them have different requirements. So it becomes a little bit problematic of how we're getting the information in a ready format that supplies most of the details that they require. And it's probably alluding to the fact that in the initial stages, because of the process and the way that we identified and gave the full details of the potential claims, where it was occurring, the costs involved, the insurers were quite comfortable with our processes, and NEMA, on the other hand, wanted more details. And now the reverse is occurring. So when we're getting into the claims process per se, the amount of details that's required for Aon is greater. But when we were talking before, where is our internal audit and where we have the additional persons coming over that resource, we've got one person that's dedicated at a senior level that is going through, and we have a number of subsequent meetings, so they're getting comfortable to the level and the assurity of our claims. So it's a problematic in the process in that we are providing more and more details associated with it, but it is progressing.
And as just supplementary. So thank you for that, Ms. Foreman. And I did kind of see that in the report. But in terms of the review that's being carried out, is that also sitting in under the risk of, I guess, the future risk if this happens again? And
so I guess and that's subsequent to what you're actually saying, is to say, would we change our insurance cover in relation to after the Gabrielle event? And that's probably what this was alluding to. So for argument's sake, what did we learn from that, or what are the risks associated with our cover that we're not perhaps fully insured, and what does it pose with our current arrangement under the BOPLAS, and what are the risks associated with it. So that's part of the whole, making sure how we've got cover, what is the cover, is it still fit for purpose? Is that not what or you meant something else?
No, it's that, but also in terms of the, because I read this part, and it could be that I've inferred the wrong thing from these from the section 5 was that I'd read it as saying that when emergency hits, we have to do all of this work and we have this process to engage with these guys and then this other added process on top, which is our insurers, and it's difficult to go back in time to, well, it's problematic in regards to the demands for information, and that we're kind of reviewing that, and I read it as that we're kind of wanting to do some process where we do better collection, or we look for a better process from another insurer. I was just trying to understand.
So no, it wasn't from that, from day one. We heard as soon as the water pipe broke, we were putting in systems in place from the processes that came through that we needed to come for 100% response from NEMA. We were making sure that we had documentations, that we were backups, everything related to the EPOs. And so that process, even though it was an arduous process, Tina, who was in there working 6 months to make sure that all the documentation for the things there, we could go back and actually identify each and every one and give justification for it. I believe some of our cohorts did not have that, but we were right there at the ground running because we knew that the process that came later would have been more difficult to justify our position. And so each part of that we had, I would consider a very robust process of how we were doing it and justification, engineers' reports, and they were even the underwriters, which came through from overseas, he said was probably the best they've ever actually seen in terms of it. So I'm saying that process, but we had to resource up really fast, really quickly in that process.
Okay, awesome. No, thank you. That gives me, that definitely gives me that assurance of us being able to meet that in the future. And your context there, reading this with that context makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Any questions for Andrew? Yes, Andy.
Yeah, thanks. I fully understand the pressure insurance companies are under at the moment and how they're reacting. And I'm pretty sure the answer is no, but I'll ask the question anyway. One of our future liabilities, I'm not talking about what's happened in the past, it's about what's happening in the future, is our potential to be liable for buyout again. I assume that's uninsurable.
At this stage, there's nothing with regards to, as a policy has been in there. So an insurance underwriting of that, no, there isn't. Whether it occurs because it becomes a function of council, then that's something that we would be obviously wanting to engage with the brokers to see if it was insurable. But at this stage, we were that this was a kind of a one-off, and councils is not normally in the business of underwriting those costs.
You raise an interesting point, Andy. I think the FOSL scheme is here to stay. Now, that's not I've got no grounds to say that, but what Gabrielle has shown is a propensity for the taxpayer to underwrite people. The taxpayer and payer to underwrite catastrophe. So I suspect there is an issue there. And look, Andrew would be better placed, or Aon would be better placed. I suspect you can get cover for anything, mate. It's just the price. And I suspect the price for a FOSL scheme would be phenomenal. Andrew, my question is actually your strategic step number 2, which is probably the one that is, after the valuation, the next biggie as far as the current year is concerned. And on page 73, you outline we sort of a split nature of that undertaking, the earthquake probable maximum loss, which I understand now the insurers called the primary loss. What is the status of our reassessed limits that we should have? Have we achieved those? Are they achievable in the next round of renewal? How does that affect the overall loss limit for the group?
Through the chair, so a loss limit is another lever to basically keep your premiums from increasing. So with a loss limit, the underwriter will put a maximum loss cover in place. So for Gisborne District Council, that is set at 250 million, of which that is only for infrastructure assets. That is not your material damage policy, which is your above ground. So we've got underground and above ground assets. So the infrastructure policy is what, that loss limit. And we also have a loss limit now for the above ground assets. So with that, it is capped as an overall, so that's a different policy where it is all of Boplas have an overarching loss limit. So for our material damage, that's set at $900 million, of which covers all 8 Boplas councils. Whereas underground is each individual council has a loss limit for their underground assets, of which ours is 250 million. Now, we have received a report that suggested that we increase our loss limit, given the value of our underground assets has now increased. And again, knowing that we're part of Boplas, it was found out that Boplas have to basically approach each council before we can get our reviewed increase. So, and we've got to realise when we do a increase in a loss limit, it is more premium. So that's another thing. It's not a lot of money, but it is an extra premium you pay because the underwriter is covering more of your assets. And Aon has indicated they need some of the bigger councils within Boplas to sort out their loss limits as well, so that you have an overarching Boplas limit that covers all of them. So currently that's set at 500 million for infrastructure under Boplas.
So I guess the implication of what you're saying is we now need to increase and then needing the approval of the other parties to Boplas, there may also be a consequent lift in that $500 million cap.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We're waiting for that to come back.
Yes.
We're waiting to come back what that is and what is the implications in terms of, but it would, it'd be the overall group, do they agree with it? And we would hopefully that information before we go for the new schedule out for next year. If it came before, we'd come back and say, hey, we would recommend to increase, to pay that premium. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess really, thank you, Pauline, you're really into my question. So the timeline to get the resolution of that first orange bullet point under 2.1 is for this coming renewal of our.
Mostly it would, but if they came in between, you would check it out.
And obviously the other ones which are critical to our strategic intent are next year's tasks, Andrew. Great. Thank you. That's really helpful. Folk, that shows you just that assurance is more than just talking to a broker and saying how much. So thank you, Andrew, for that. That's really helpful. Any other questions for him? All right, can we go to the resolution, please, which you know the report. Thank you, Josh. I'll second that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Brilliant. So we move to the motion, please, to move into PX. Yep. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Is there any discussion on the motion? Pause there. It all makes good sense to me that we need to go for these matters. If that's the case, I'll put it all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried.